This building is at the forefront of South Africa's HIV and AIDS research programs. Under the leadership of Professor Salim Abdul Karim, the Durban-based facility has also played a vital research role during the COVID-19 pandemic.
That's good. The pandemic emergency is now receding. We are no longer in a situation where we are concerned about hospitals getting overwhelmed. But one of the big concerns remains the level of uncertainty.
In 2020, South Africa established a ministerial advisory committee comprising scientists, researchers, and doctors. It advised the government on its response to the pandemic. Professor Abdul Karim was tasked by the Minister of Health to be its chairperson.
He hadn't consulted me, but he knew I would never say no. That when called upon by my country to serve in that way, I was always going to say yes. So I learned at the same time as everyone else that I was to chair our country's coronavirus effort.
After spending decades helping the fight against polio, measles, tuberculosis, and other infectious diseases, Abdul Karim dedicated his research efforts to HIV. It was this vast expertise that would allow the professor to shift focus when asked to lead the country's COVID-19 response.
South Africa had developed enormous infrastructure to deal with its HIV epidemic. It's that same infrastructure that was able to pivot to deal with COVID-19. For example, we've always monitored viruses and the genetic sequences for drug resistance. Simply put, we use the same technology to look at the variants of COVID.
South Africa has had a long history with HIV and has the highest number of people living with the virus worldwide.
Good afternoon.
Abdul Karim says that in contrast to the denials issued by the government at the start of the HIV epidemic, COVID-19 showed South Africa's current leaders were open to scientific advice.
Right from the beginning of the pandemic, both the president and the minister wanted to hear from scientists, and the scientists made enormous contributions, testing new diagnostics, doing studies on vaccines, and importantly, the discovery of the Beta variant and the Omicron variant came from right here in South Africa.
On the other hand, the South African government did draw a lot of criticism over its extremely tough lockdown measures. These had a far-reaching economic impact in a country already facing widespread inequality and high unemployment. And the effects are still being felt 2 years later. But Professor Abdul Karim stands by the government's decision.
You know, we were not directly involved in the decisions regarding the lockdown, but there was little question in my mind at that time, and I would agree with it even to this day, given the level of uncertainty, given our concerns about what we were seeing in Italy, in New York City, about how hospitals were being overwhelmed, that action needed to be taken, and it needed to be quite drastic at that time.
Another challenge presented by COVID-19 globally has been the massive spread of disinformation. According to the professor, this is not only detrimental to science, but to his personal safety as well.
For example, when I was advising that schools be open, I was called Dr. Death. My wife and I both were subjected to attacks and threats, but I was not going to be intimidated. And I was not going to let those threats determine what I was going to say or not.
Abdul Karim's commitment to scientific facts earned him the 2020 John Maddox Prize, awarded by the Nature Science Journal. He shared the prestigious award with the USA's Anthony Fauci. While many may see the virus tapering off, Karim's work is far from over. He currently serves on the World Health Organization's Science Council and as a professor at both Harvard and Columbia universities. so there's little downtime for hobbies. But strolls along Durban's famous beachfront promenades give him space to unwind, de-stress, and reflect.
South Africa is an amazing country. It has so much potential. COVID-19, destroyed some of that and its economic impact. I look to the future. I look to the future where South Africa regains its prosperity, but recognizing that we need to be prepared for the next pandemic.
Abdul Karim firmly believes that South Africa's resilience can be a source of inspiration to all.